I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Lee Bratcher, President and Founder of the Texas Blockchain Council. Lee, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Ashton, thanks for having me on. It's an honor.
You're welcome. I'm excited to dive into everything Bitcoin, blockchain in America, in Texas. I know mining is a big part of that as well, so excited to dive into all of that. I'd love to start off today by hearing a little bit about what you and the council have built at Texas Blockchain Council, and then we can dive into all of the latest details.
Sure. Yeah, we're a nonprofit trade association. So what that means is it's similar to a chamber of commerce. We advocate for the digital assets industry, both here in Texas and at the U.S. at the federal level. We are working primarily to make Texas the jurisdiction of choice for Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital assets. Whether that is through policy or through our business development efforts. We're trying to bring as many companies here as possible. And I think in general, just keep companies in the US. There's been, as you know, a big hemorrhaging of talent, developers, founders, capital overseas in the last several years. And we need to reverse that trend.
Mm-hmm. And what got you personally interested in this? Was it just your interest in blockchain and then, hey, we need to keep this in America?
Yeah, before I founded the council, I was a political science professor, and my research area was property rights. And then I discovered the Bitcoin white paper and digital property rights. And I thought, I want to bet the rest of my career on this. I just don't know how to do that. And so I took some of my skills from my previous life, military officer, political science professor, and applied those to helping the digital assets industry engage with regulators, policymakers, and elected officials. And it's been a lot of fun doing that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's very cool. I'd love to dive more into how the council is helping Texas specifically, and as you said, make Texas the place for American companies that are in digital assets. I would love to start off with that kind of question. Like, if there was founders that are like, hey, we want to start another blockchain company, why do you think they should start it in Texas as opposed to any other state?
Well, it's pretty simple. Texas is the best place in the U.S. to do business, the best, consistently rated the #1 state to do business in the U.S. That is beyond just crypto and digital assets. That's for any business. So we are starting from that platform, which is a pretty good place to start. Obviously, the tax environment here is much more favorable. There's a few other states that have a tax environment similar to ours, like Tennessee and a few other states. But, those two things are pretty compelling. From the crypto-specific standpoint, we've passed legislation here, including virtual currency legislation for Uniform Commercial Code, which is like business law, that defines for the purpose of business law that you can perfect your security interests in digital assets through possession of cryptographic keys. So we're recognizing, cryptographic keys in statute, passed several other pieces of legislation, including proof of reserves legislation that requires all virtual asset service providers, exchanges, et cetera, to have a clear accounting of their liabilities and their assets. And for companies that are doing things the right way, this is actually a good thing. We want to be regulated as an industry. We obviously don't want the uncertainty that the SEC has bestowed on the industry for the last several years. Since the inception of the industry, really, we haven't had a rulemaking that has made things clear. So all of those reasons combined makes Texas a really great place to be for founders, investors, and folks in the digital asset industry.
Definitely. It's really great to hear. And what do you think about the future moving forward with the new Trump administration? Seemed to be, the side that was much more bullish on crypto and policies more favorable. How do you think that's going to play out starting in 2025 with how it will affect your team's efforts as well to get policy enacted and to help with innovation in blockchain?
Yeah, it's pretty clear that we are going to get market structure legislation in 2025, probably something similar to the FIT21 Act, which the SEC and the CFTC are called out specifically in that act to really delineate who has jurisdiction over assets, whether they be commodities or securities. and create sort of a spectrum of decentralization so that an asset can go from being a security to a commodity at a later point. And so that's very important for the industry. We need to end the turf war between the CFTC and the SEC. That's not helpful for anyone. I think Gary Gensler departing the SEC, which I'm sure he will in the next 45 days or so, is a very positive step in that as well. We're going to get stablecoin legislation in 2025. That's very important for the US dollar. Stablecoins are a forced buyer of US treasuries. 99% of stablecoins are denominated in US dollars. We want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency for many decades to come. Without stablecoins, we're probably looking at the dollar becoming just a basket, part of the basket of world reserve currencies, even in the next decade. And with stablecoins, it could prolong the dollar. Who knows? But it could prolong the dollar as a world reserve currency for many decades to come. Stablecoins buy more U.S. treasuries than the state of the country of Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of momentum there on stablecoins as well.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. And it's incredible to think no one would have thought a few years ago that stablecoins in digital assets might be one of the main reasons that the US dollar could maintain its status as a world reserve currency.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting to see. And I think more people will give that theory a lot more credence when we have, stablecoin assets are multi-hundreds of billions right now. I think soon they'll be $1 trillion asset. Stablecoins in and of itself, like crypto, obviously is a $3 trillion asset class. But when stablecoins hit that kind of velocity and volume, everybody from the Fed, to the Department of Treasury will be looking at this.
Mm-hmm. And there was some recent news around Trump mentioning that American-made blockchain companies would receive, be more favorable. That at least they're trying to make Bitcoin made in America and at least help more blockchain companies, give them a leg up in the industry. Do you think that that's something that will happen in the very near future?
Yeah, I think a Bitcoin strategic reserve for the United States would be a great step forward. I don't know if that's something that will happen in 2025. I think Polymarket odds put it at like 35% or something like that. But definitely in the next 5 or 6 years, I would imagine that we see something to that effect. Bitcoin mining is flourishing in the United States. About 40% of all mining globally is in the US. And about half the mining that takes place in the US is in Texas. Mm-hmm. So we feel pretty good about our place in that ecosystem. And I think the rest of the industry will greatly benefit from the future president's or former and now future President Trump's appointments, including to the Secretary of Treasury. I think Howard Lutnick I think he's the front runner there. And he's obviously the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, very bullish about Bitcoin. So lots of good things to come in that department as well.
Definitely. And that point on Bitcoin mining, obviously Bitcoin can't survive without the decentralized network and the miners. And most know that Texas is the place, what is the place for oil and gas as well. But now that easily translates into Bitcoin. How much importance of the Texas Blockchain Council is focused on mining versus other industry use case and financial applications?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have a large portion of our membership is in the Bitcoin mining industry, energy industry, data centers. And so we have to staff up in a unique way in that we need expertise on the energy grid, on data centers, on energy policy, but then we also need expertise on financial services. So it's really two different distinct areas of work for us. And I'd say Bitcoin mining is our deepest area of expertise, and we likely have more members in that, and not likely, we definitely have more members in that industry vertical than any other vertical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really exciting. And you mentioned there in the last answer about Bitcoin reserves. It might not happen in 2025, but what do you think about Texas more adopting and advocating for that? To be holding Bitcoin reserves, or any of the other states?
Yeah, it's partially a little bit of a selfish answer because I want Texas to beat the federal government to having a Bitcoin reserve. And I think the earliest that we could see that pass in Texas is May of 2025. So if the federal government does it before then, they're going to beat us. And if not, then we've got a decent chance of getting something passed. Legislation is very difficult to get passed. Only about less than 2% of all bills filed federally pass, and between 4 and 8% of bills filed at the state level in Texas pass. So it's an uphill battle, but we've got a pretty good track record. We passed lots of legislation. Our first session we were 50%. Our second session we were, I believe, 25%. So essentially, our track record is passing legislation is much higher than the average.
That's great to hear. And last January, when the ETFs launched, obviously we've seen a huge capital influx into those over the last year. How much has that translated into sort of a wake up of the policy and regulation and like, hey, we really need to make sure all of these things are being done now because there's so much more capital coming into the industry?
Yeah, I think it's very helpful. I mean, the elected officials and regulators are very familiar with names like BlackRock and some of these other companies, Fidelity. We needed the brand approval. And approval is not the right word there, but sort of the brand protection from some of these large brands for legislators and elected officials to feel a little bit safer. A lot of them were already bullish and gung-ho, but for those that weren't yet comfortable with the industry, it's just very new. They needed a little bit of coverage and a little bit of top cover, if you will, from brands like those. And so it does help in the halls of the legislature.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the council and organizations transitioning into DAO or decentralized autonomous organization formats where there's more contribution from the community members, but there's a balance of making sure that everyone's on the same page and also getting things done efficiently?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are working on DAO legislation for Texas that would allow DAOs to be formed here. DAOs can already be formed in Texas, but it would be DAO-specific legislation. I think it's a great entity formation tool. It doesn't work for every company. You don't want like a 3-member LLC forming a DAO. You have to really have a community. It has to be decentralized, and there has to be some transparency and governance checks, which I think DAOs provide through the code and through the initial smart contracts that are put in place. So unfortunately, because of kind of IRS regulations, the council can't become a DAO because we are a 501c6 trade association. It's unclear that if we could become a DAO or not, just based on some of our tax. We're in this weird state where we're not a charity, we're not a C3, so we don't get donations, but we are a nonprofit. We operate like a chamber of commerce. I think the NFL is also a 501c, either C4 or a C6. So some of these entities have some unique structures. But for the most part, if there are large communities like ATX DAO, which is in Austin, you may be familiar with them. They're an amazing organization. I think there's other DAOs springing up in Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth. Push that forward. It's a good structure for DAOs. DAOs can come alongside, especially handling things that the government's not doing well at handling, like mental health, societal challenges of that nature. So I think DAOs are a really good structure for handling some of those collective action problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing to see more popular DAOs popping up, and I have seen the ATX DAO. So I think some organizations are looking into it, and as you said, it's not right for every company, but people are thinking, hey, how can we get the community or our users, customers more involved? And I think that there's definitely benefits in that. And now, I saw that there's an event coming up that you guys are a part of as well, and it's in Dallas, the North American Blockchain Summit. I'm guessing a lot of the topics that we discussed today around the policy regulation in Texas will be a part of that. Can you shed light on what exactly are some of the focuses of the Blockchain Council being at the event, and what are the main speakers going to be talking about?
Yeah, that's right. We're hosting that event alongside many of our sponsors. And, the reason why we changed the name a couple of years ago from the Texas Blockchain Summit to the North American Blockchain Summit is essentially we're incorporating model policy from other states. We're getting input from other states, and we also have a lot of thoughts on DC policy. And so you'll hear from figures like Majority Whip Emmer, Tom Emmer, who is well known in the digital asset community, former House Speaker Paul Ryan, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, CFTC Commissioner Summer Mersinger, and then a lot of the crypto executives in the exchanges, Coinbase, blockchain.com, et cetera. So some of the key focus areas, of course, will be Bitcoin mining, energy, data centers, but also tokenization of real world assets, payments, DeFi, institutional, a couple panels on institutional involvement and capital allocators and money managers and how they're thinking about it. So we'll have folks from Invesco, from Bitwise, and from some of the ETF issuers who are speaking as well.
That's very cool. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll do my best to dive into that. I feel like we're right on the precipice of the new administration, and I feel like Texas is the place to be for blockchain. So it's all very exciting.
Well, we're glad that you're here in the great state of Texas now too.
Yeah. And what is the best way to learn more about the council, or to join the council, or to learn about the event and what else is going on in Texas?
Yeah, you can find us at just texasblockchaincouncil.org. The summit website, if you just Google North American Blockchain Summit, it'll come up. And so we'd love to engage with folks, both at the summit and in membership for the association.
Sounds great, Lee. I can leave those links in the show notes below as well. I appreciate your insights into the current state of blockchain in Texas and the US. It's a very exciting time right now. I'm wishing you guys all the best with the council and the event, and let's definitely follow up in the near future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Ashton.